All right, guys, welcome to the Liberty Experts Podcast. And today I am joined with an expert at regenerative farming and someone who knows a lot about the basis of the Canadian government. And I'm going to have a chat with him. Today we're talking with Curtis Stone. And Curtis has sent me a number of messages, and I interviewed a mutual acquaintance of ours out at a regenerative farm not too long ago. But Curtis and I have been messaging back and forth, and he has been explaining to me the difference
Sorry,
between...
dude.
Oh, no worries.
Dropped out for some reason.
Yeah, that's all right. I was just introducing you and telling the audience there that you're going to be... I'm going to be chatting with you about the difference between de facto government, de jure government, why it matters, and a little bit of history of Canada and why your case, I guess, for why it's a de facto government. So why don't you explain some of this to me? First of all, how did you get interested in this topic, and where has it led you?
Totally. Are we doing this live? Is this live right now?
No, it's not live. No,
Okay.
no, I'm recording it. So
Okay.
So we can edit out anything.
Okay, right on.
But I probably won't. So.
So yeah, I got into maybe the backstory kind of helps actually. So a lot of people know me as the urban farmer, and I've been making videos on my farm for many years now, and been pretty liberty minded for a long time. I think kind of Ron Paul woke me up in 2008. Then I got into all this other Mises and Hayek and all Rothbard and all these other kind of libertarian anarcho-capitalist thinkers and stuff like that. And just through my farming work, as being a public guy, and I get a lot of consulting requests, and started doing a lot of consulting many years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. And just through that, at first I was mostly consulting in Canada. Then I started to go and branch out to other countries. But in Canada, I just always discovered these same problems that farmers were having. That just these stupid government problems. Some inspector wants to come and inspect you, and it's really, really bad in the meat and dairy industry. Less bad in the vegetable industry, but still not great. And so that kind of opened me and showed me this stuff a little bit. And I'm going to tell you about some farmers I met that opened my mind with this whole thing. But I just want to tell you one quick story about my firsthand experience with the de facto state. This is when I was farming, and so I had a microgreens operation. I'm in the greenhouse of that operation right now. It's not running right now, but I had many years. This was all microgreens, and I had the Canadian Food Inspection Agency essentially try to shake me down, and they did it. Right. And I'd seen this many times in my consulting. They contact you and they say, "Hey, we want to come and inspect your farm. Blah blah blah. We're going to come here. You got to have SOPs. It's going to take 4 hours." Whatever. And I've seen just through my consulting practice, most farmers just throw their hands up and go, "Oh my God, okay, bend me over and take whatever you want," right? The pirates show up, and so when this happened, I had been a little bit switched on to this de facto thing. Is that I understood more or less the premise, which is that Canada is not a country; it's just a corporation that all stems from the Hudson's Bay Charter. And so I kind of followed a boilerplate in that many of the ways to deal with the state. And I'm not offering this as remedy that people can use this and just go and do it, because there's no guarantee. I don't know. But this thing, what I'm going to tell you, worked for me. It's called a conditional acceptance. So because in Canada, they're using a system of law that's statute law, and it all stems from Roman civil law. Like if you really go back, and that all came from contracts. So like everything in our legal system is a contract, even when you read an act. So if you read, say, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency Act or the Agricultural Land Commission Act, and then you compare those to what a contract in a business contract looks like, they're much the same. And there's a reason for that, is that they are essentially our business contracts. So when the state comes at you with something, it's an offer to contract. And so
Right.
the best way to avoid problems, this is just what I learned, and I just tried because I was like, well, I'll just try it and see what happens. The best way to avoid problems is to take the offer on a condition. So instead of
Mm.
saying, no, you can't come on my property, I'm an anarchist, this, that, and the other, that doesn't work. They bring down the hammer then. But you say, oh, so I said, I accept your offer to come to my property. And basically what I said was, okay, Mr. Bureaucrat, I accept your offer to come and inspect my property at this date on these 3 conditions. First condition is I need a certified true copy of the act with proof of royal assent, meaning that there's a signature from a lieutenant governor, governor general,
Right.
or a queen, royalty. We in Canada think we're in this monarchy thing. So I said that, number 1. I said number 2, I need all documentation that shows you have the ability to act under Her Majesty in good faith, and I need your oath of allegiance to Her Majesty. Third, I want a consulting fee of $250 an hour for my time, and
Nice.
you're gonna compensate all my staff
I use that for
$40 an hour.
door-to-door salesmen, by the way, or Jehovah's Witnesses. I say, listen,
Yeah, good.
I'll be glad to hear your pitch, but it's going to cost you a $75 deposit. I'll give you half an hour. If
Yeah,
I buy your product or you convert
yeah,
me to your religion, I'll refund you the money. But it's you're gonna have
great.
to sell me on it. That usually
Yeah.
turns them away. But
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
sorry.
And so this is exactly this is what I did. And then I put a tacit agreement on the bottom, and a tacit agreement is what they often do in the legal system. It's why we're under contract on all kinds of things we don't
Right.
realize, because tacit agreement is, if you don't respond within this time, we accept that you accept the terms that you've consented, essentially. So I came back at him with that, and he'd probably never seen anything like that in his life. And at first he said, I can't get you any of those things. That doesn't, for one, the certified true copy, or no, there's a certified true copy, but I can't get you a copy with the royal assent because it doesn't exist. And then he threw all his paperwork at me. Anyways, he basically put up his hands and said, have a nice day. Like, see you later. And there was nothing ever after that. And I have to admit that I was a little bit kind of freaked out for a few months, like,
Hmm.
oh man, what's going to happen? But nothing. So that was my first foray into that. And that's what's learning a little bit, trying it, and then going, wow, that was ridiculously easy. So again, I want to tell your audience that I'm not here to say, go and do that. I don't want people to
Right.
get into trouble. I'm not saying that this is a guaranteed remedy for your situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so go ahead, Tim.
No. So I just want to. So I'm wondering what this guy was thinking when he read your contract, right? Because I'm sure he has no understanding of
No.
the authority that he's operating under necessarily. Like he doesn't, um, like he just thinks, okay, this is my job. I just know how these bureaucrats
Yeah.
operate, right? They just assume that they have the authority because
Well, yeah.
everyone tells them to and everyone obeys them. And so my guess is he looked at this and went, what's this? And am I opening up myself up to some sort of legal thing? And is there another way to come at this than like,
Well, what I think what he
it's kind
would
of like what like when a cop comes across a sovereign citizen or a free man on the land or something, and they put up this notice that supposedly gives them some kind of immunity, saying that they're operating in what is it, maritime law or something like that. And the
common
cop
law.
probably is like, oh geez, guy's going to give me a big hassle in court. And probably, you know 3/4 of the time the cop's just like, whatever, I'm not, it's not worth writing this guy a ticket over the headache it's going to cause in
Yeah.
court. And it's not necessarily that this guy's pulling out a trump card saying, haha, gotcha, found a
Right.
loophole where you can't, so much as it is the cop's just like, the squeeze is not worth the juice kind of thing.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I would love to know what some cops in that situation had going through their head. I'm pretty sure what happened to this guy is he saw that and went, what the hell is this dude talking about? And he took it upstairs, and
Right.
he probably took it to
Yeah.
a deputy minister or a deputy to the minister. And those are the ones that are, in my experience, they're like the Canadian deep state. They're the
Right.
ones that are like, there's some deputies here in British Columbia that have been in there for like 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And
Right.
so they're total cronies. They know how the elected officials, in my opinion, are just useful idiots. They don't know anything about this. They're just there because they think they can use the government for good, and I think they have good intentions.
Right.
But he would
Okay.
have taken it to a deputy, and the deputy would have been like, yeah, he kind of has you there. You can't really
Right.
do
Right.
anything.
Okay, so let me, so let me just try to summarize this, for my own sake, and maybe for the listeners who it's their first time hearing this. I've got a buddy who has not paid income tax since about 1997 or something like that, and he subscribes to, sounds like a similar theory to you. He says, the income tax, for example, is voluntary. You don't have to pay it if unless you contract yourself to pay it, right? So he teaches people how to make the tax code not apply to them, essentially. And he does that by saying, so for example, he would say that if you sign that TD1 form when you get hired and you give them your social insurance number, you are contracting
You're
with
in.
them. So you
Yep.
are now voluntarily taking it on yourself to be a taxpayer. And so, yes, in that case, you have to pay tax, but you're agreeing to it in essence to do that. But what he would say is, set up all your contracts as a natural person, not a legal person. And then you can get away with it. I'm just totally kind of somewhat botching his explanation here, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, and there's way more to it than that.
Right, of course.
Let me carry on with what happened next and where this whole thing went. So that was kind of me introducing my first foray into this, like, wow, this is amazing. So I through my work in agriculture, I've tried to do a lot of just helping people, and a lot of that was through social media, making videos and stuff. And I was contacted by a group of growers on Vancouver Island that were having a hell of a time with this new stupid legislation they brought in with the Agricultural Land Commission. So those in your audience who don't know who aren't from BC, we have this thing in British Columbia called the ALR, which is, in a real simple nutshell, it's this sort of Marxist land policy where, develop's going to swallow up all the agricultural land. So we better create some good doing government policy to protect us from big evil developers taking up all the ag land, which is insane because we barely produce any of our own food here anymore. But anyways, anyways, it's there. And they keep tweaking things in this. So I was introduced, I went to the island and I interviewed some farmers there. And that kind of resulted in a video I put up on YouTube about, I think I titled it something like, farmers are getting screwed. This is never going to stop. And this is why, or whatever. Right. And what I did is I told the story of this woman named Jody Lucas, who had this great permaculture type business, growing all the food, restaurant. They make and grow everything there. It's amazing. But in the ALR, no, you can't do that. If you want to sell the vegetables on your farm, you have to have a liquor license. And it's like,
wow,
what? Why? So they invested $150,000 to make a brewery so that they could get a license so that they could sell their own vegetables. And then they said no. So the whole story is insane. I think since then, because I brought so much pressure on them through YouTube, I think they've kind of recoiled a little bit, the ALC. Anyways, so we have this thing. So I started digging. And actually, I'm just going to I have the act right here. Just give me one second. So I started digging. And I really actually got into the last year reading acts. And the thing, so this is the ALC Act, and there's some interesting things in this. The first thing that is the biggest crux of the issue here is this royal assent thing. So a bunch of farmers got really upset about all this stuff they were doing in the ALC because it's basically just infringing on their rights. And it was screwing up all this generation planning from farmers. And, land's expensive these days, especially in BC. And so the situation is, some farmers had some land. They had their kids on the land. Now they want to retire, but they'd like to stay on the land, and they'd like their kids to build a smaller house or something that they can have their kids in and stay on the land. It's a beautiful thing. But this whole adjustments they've made to the ALC don't allow that, essentially. And so they got a lot of people pissed off. So I went to this hearing. They were having these public hearings, more like information center sessions, where all these bureaucrats, it was the deputy of the Minister of Agriculture there, and a few of the commissioners and whatever. And the deputy of the Minister of Agriculture got up there and said in front of, I was in the audience with 100 other growers that were all pissed off. He said, "This act has been given royal assent on blah, blah, blah date and whatnot." And I called him out, and I had a recording of it, and I put it in the YouTube video. I said, "Actually, James Mack, his name is, no, it hasn't. And I don't see any documentation anywhere that shows this as royal assent." So for those who don't know what this royal assent thing is, it's this thing that, because we have apparently a constitutional monarchy, which I'm going to explain how we don't, but apparently we do, we need to get this thing called royal assent to make an act have force and effect. So it has to be approved by the royalty, which is either the Queen or the Lieutenant Governor or the Governor General. And this thing hasn't got royal assent. And there are some things that have, apparently, but it even says in the Royal Assent Act, things are done through writing. And there's no contract in Roman civil law that is done through a wink and a nod, which is this royal assent thing. It's done through writing. Anyways, I called out James Mack in this thing, and I said, "Excuse me, sir," and I talked to the audience, "this doesn't have royal assent. The original 1973 Act never got royal assent. I haven't had a single bureaucrat show me evidence of it." And he was like, "Oh," he got all huffy and puffy. He's like, "Oh, no, it does." And he kind of laughed it off. "Yeah, it does. I'll send it to you." So anyways, after that, talked to him, shook his hand. He was very polite. I said, "Please send it to me. I'm going to email you." Send it. So he did that. He got one of his assistants to follow up. And she sent me a document, and it's in the video that I have of mine, that is basically signatures from the clerk. So it's like they hide in plain sight. They're trying to show you, oh, there's royal assent. There's a signature from the clerk. There's 4 signatures. And then on the 4th one, it's really magical. There's a stamp that says royal assent, but then the signatures from the clerk of the Legislative Assembly, not of the Governor General or the Lieutenant Governor. So what the hell is that? Anyways, the whole thing is bogus. And even in this act, this is the thing that I've discovered about all this stuff in government. Once you start reading the acts, because it's just like terms of service in your software, nobody reads it. But go into the act. So this is a really interesting one. This is the ALC Act. You always got to go look at the definitions, but just so you can see, can you see, where's person? See person. Definition of
First
person.
Nation government.
What the hell does that mean? Because in legalese, includes means that and only that. Includes in legalese means the exclusion of everything else. So if the ALC Act is about persons that are farmers, who the hell are they talking about? Because am I a First Nations government as a farmer? Are you? Who are we talking about? The thing that's even weirder about in this is they don't even define farm or farmer. So it's like, what is this thing? So it's full of holes, basically.
Yeah.
And there's
and if
remedy.
the way to wait and protest has taught us anything, it's that we don't know what a First Nation government is. Is it hereditary ethno kings, or is it
we don't know.
Some kind of liberal democracy that the Indian Act imposed, or is it something else?
We don't know. And that I've read the Indian Act, and that is a horrifying piece of document.
So we have so it sounds to my ears here like you have basically found a bunch of contradictions in their own rule set, right? Like they're saying, okay, in order for law to be valid, it has to have royal assent, and that has to be in writing, and they haven't done that for this thing. And then there's some vague and contradictory things, like in terms of definitions and who does this apply to and all that kind of thing. So it sounds like you're kind of holding their feet to their fire there. Is that essentially the crux of what's going on here?
This isn't the crux. The real crux is where we get a little bit deeper. So this is the thing that I discovered in this, is that you can go down a rabbit hole with all these different things, and you can kind of fight them on different levels. Like you can go, we'll talk about the de facto Canada in a second, but you can often just look at the legal document itself and find a lot of remedy in that, which is so strange to me, because it's like, why would they do that? And I can't get my head around it. I honestly don't even have any theories as to why they would put sort of holes in their document that anybody who read this would go, person, a First Nations government. Well, show me how I'm a First Nations
But it
government, and
says,
then maybe we can talk.
doesn't it say can include a First Nations government?
No, it says includes a First Nations government.
Includes a First Nation government.
Because in legalese, yeah, includes a First Nations government. That's exactly what it says.
Right.
In legalese, includes means that and only that. So look at any legal dictionary, Bouvier's, Black's Laws, whatever. Canadian Law Dictionary is good. That's what includes means. Includes doesn't mean that and the other stuff. It means that and only that. That's what's tricky about legalese. And that's where this whole statute, Roman civil law, tricks everybody, because words that you think mean something don't. Like the word person in legalese means a fiction like a corporation. That's literally what it means in a legal dictionary. Look it up. It'll blow your mind.
So couldn't we say then that person there means that whatever's in Black's dictionary, a legal fiction, including First Nation government? Because I would assume a person might also include a corporation or something like that you would treat as a.
Well, not here. This is why acts and statutes and contracts always make their definitions. If that's their definition, that's their definition. Their definition. This definition doesn't say person as referred to here and here plus includes a First Nations government. It just says that includes a First Nations government. That's it. That's the contract. That's what you're dealing with there. So anyways,
my guess is they just had I don't know. I would guess, like, just, thinking in terms of how I know bureaucrats function, they probably just, they probably just had a student lawyer or someone. I mean, that's a pretty big document, right? So I'm guessing that they probably just went with whatever the normal term of person is in law. They probably didn't realize they needed to add the specific, all the things that it could be.
But the thing that's confusing about it, like really on this thing, is why does it include a First Nations government at all? Because the ALR has nothing to do with that. It's just, it's weird.
It probably mentions person at some point in the legislation, right?
Of course it does. And when it does, the person they're referring to is that, because that in a contract.
Well, I'm guessing that what they would think is that a person means whatever the Black Laws definition means plus First Nations government, right?
Well, I think they're assuming people will assume that, and that's the trick.
Maybe. I never ascribe to intent what can be explained by just basic incompetence, but it could be that.
Totally. But so anyways, so I found all these holes in this, and then I started to dig into the royal assent thing, and then I found these videos, and I even subbed them into this YouTube video I made, and I show the ceremony, and it's unbelievable, because in contract law, you can't do anything without a signature. You can't say, "Hey Tim, you and I had it. We shook hands 20 years ago. Remember that when we were dumb teenagers and we shook hands, and I said that one day, if I come on this podcast and prove to your audience, blah, 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 you're going to pay me $1,000." And you're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? But you did, So this whole royal assent thing, that's what it is. It used to be signatures, apparently. It's really hard to find the history on this stuff. It used to be. And it even says, if you Google the Royal Assent Act of Canada, you can see it references things in writing. Right. But then they made it into this dog and pony show. Now, I don't know exactly why. Part of me, this is kind of my theory, is that this whole de facto Canada thing is this big lie that they've been perpetuating for over 121 years it is now. And they don't do it just to cover their butts. They just don't sign things to cover their ass.
Let's get into de facto government versus de jure government. My understanding from just the basic, I had to Google this, and so de facto is basically invalid or illegitimate, and de jure is basically legitimate.
Yeah, de facto is is illegitimate, but in fact.
Right.
So it's like
So it exists, but it's not legitimate.
yeah, it exists in fact, but it's essentially through force of arms. There's other ways
Right.
of other
Okay.
definitions. And then de jure is proper constitution. We the people,
Right.
for the people.
Okay. Yeah. But from a Rothbardian perspective, there's no such thing as a de jure government. The government by definition is always de facto, essentially. There's no way you can bring it into
Well,
legitimacy.
yeah,
So
because
how would that even work?
well, the US is a dual system. The US, and it's quite easy to find. You will find if you go into, you'll see that sometimes the states, when they're the way they're written, say it's Alabama, are written in title case, and then sometimes they're written in all uppercase in capitals. So there's two states. There's the state of Alabama, which is the geographical place as defined in the Constitution of these borders.
And then there's the fictional
And then
entity.
there's the fictional entity, which is registered in Washington, D.C. on the United States Security Exchange Commission.
Right.
That's the de facto, and the place is the de jure. And maybe I've never heard what Rothbard has to say about that. But the fact is that the de jure exists in the United States because there are millions of American nationals. Like, it's a fact. And on their passports, it'll say citizenship other. It's a fact. Like it's a massive movement in the US. It's a patriot movement. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on since like Abe Lincoln, because I think Abe Lincoln was the guy that did this whole switcheroo thing with the US. And then they moved the US into maritime law, and that's why the Statue of Liberty is in the water, because maritime law is for the water.
But so from my perspective, from I guess a Rothbardian perspective, in order for a government, I guess, to be legitimate, you would have to have a contract with it, right? It would be something like a dispute resolution organization or a defense agency that you delegate your right to or that you delegate. Yeah, you have a right to self-defense, and you can delegate that to this other organization. We'll call it a government for now, and you do that through a contract. And but that's from the individuals to that entity. Now, but that could just be, like a security company. We wouldn't call a government, right?
Well, for certain things like that, yes. But in the original Constitution, there was, what was it, 11 or 13 or something like that? Some magic number of, these are the things that the government does, and that's it.
Yeah, but only the founding fathers signed on to that. Like, no other American signed on to that. So why should they?
Well, it's a very good.
Why should the government have anything to do with them?
It's a very good philosophical point, Tim. And I
right.
don't.
Yeah,
know.
well,
I don't have an answer for it.
Well, I guess that's my question. I think that's what it all comes down to, is where I could never wrap my head around what my buddy was doing. Like, I get that he's getting out of paying income tax. He probably has a good case, and he's going to take the CRA to court, I think, and he thinks he has a good chance of winning because he's drilling down into the nitty-gritty of how, like, government survives by an illusion, right? All government, there's an illusion that it has some legitimacy.
Yeah.
But it's all supported by contradictions and lies, right? So on one hand, they'll say theft is immoral, but yet we can steal and call it taxation.
It's a monopoly.
Right. But if you drill down deep enough, that you get to the root of it, and there is no legitimacy there, because there was no individuals didn't sign a contract with it, per se.
Yeah,
they didn't consent to it, right? And so
Well, wait a second. Actually, they did, though. They did, and this is where you get into the weeds with this stuff.
Okay,
is that we did consent. We consented either through tacit agreement, or we consented when we signed up for the SIN number. We consented when we got our driver's license. The only place we didn't consent that I can find is on the original founding document, which is the birth certificate document, because you were too young to consent.
I think that's a pretty loose definition of consent, right? Like, basically, most of us don't know we have a choice. And so in order for consent to be valid, it has to be informed, right? Like,
but
you
ignorance
know,
under law is no excuse. Like
yeah, but
ignorance under court of law is no excuse. And that's literally what they say. So
sure, but that's their rules. I mean,
of course, but
their law isn't legitimate, right? So it's no
I
excuse for
agree,
them.
man. I'm
But
with
my
you.
ignorance of your rules is no excuse for you to put your jackboot on me,
Exactly.
right?
Dude, I'm
So
with you
they're
100%.
the ones that don't have an excuse.
I agree.
So
But this is unfortunately the world we live in. And so we are just trying to make our way through it and try to make some sense of it. Now, I'd like to explain to you how this all happened.
sure,
If you'd like to hear this.
yeah, let's hear it.
So basically, what happened was, and if people want more details on this, like I'll share my info.
Yeah, send me
I
all
have
your
a
links, guys.
yeah
We'll post his links down below
down
in
below.
the
I've got
comment
a
section.
great podcast with Doug Force, and he's one of the best guys that I've ever talked to that explains it very, very well. But I've got I'm going to summarize it here. Essentially, what happened. So when Canada was founded, or not founded, I mean, is basically there was a charter. These charters written, but their letters patent for all these lords and ladies and kings to go out and explore Canada, or they sent people to go and do it, right? And so they set up the Hudson's Bay Company. That was one of the first things that was the first sort of company in Canada. And they had this big area of land called Rupert's Land. And, long time went by. Okay, let's set up a country. So they formed the BNA Act, the British North America Act, which is which is the founding document of Canada, and it's also referred to as the Charter, I believe. It's referred. They call what else do they call the BNA Act? Anyways, we'll just call
Constitution.
Maybe it's the Constitution, yeah. So the British North America Act.
It forms part of our Constitution.
That's right. Yeah. And there was a clause in the BNA Act, Section 2. It was called the Enacting Clause. And what the Enacting Clause said, essentially, was that this act is in perpetuity forever under the Crown. So under the British monarchy, this act stays in perpetuity. So whoever's going to be the successor of King George, which I believe was Queen Victoria, it's going to succeed too. And so that was part of it. What happened later in the British Empire? Because the British Empire had people all around the world. They had New Zealand, Australia. They were stretched out, and it's expensive to run an empire, especially when that empire is on the ground, very dependent on the original crown. So it was getting expensive. So basically, the crown decided in 1893, in 1893 to write what was called the Statute Law Revision Act. And they removed the enacting clause from the BNA Act that basically took out the perpetuity of the act. They took it out because it was getting too expensive. And they're like, you know what? Let these people form their own country and they can sort it out themselves. But we're essentially going to sign off. And when Queen Victoria dies, that's it. There's no more British monarchy. So Queen Victoria died 1901. All the dominions became free and sovereign states right at that moment. And at that time, actually, or 6 years after that, 1907, Australia went and formed a constitution and formed a de jure government at that time. 70 years later, they lost it in the Unidroit Treaty. They basically became another American corporation, but they did it, but Canada never did it. They basically perpetuated this lie because all the people in power were comfy in their positions, I guess. Like I don't actually know what was going on through their heads, but so the crown, the Canada remained dependent on the British monarchy for another 30 years. That's when they brought in the Statute of Westminster, which basically cut it. That's done. This is it. It's over. And that's essentially that's what happened. And then we had all these things, in 1982, the Canada Act, they morphed the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. which is really interesting too, because a charter is what you do when you make a corporation. So this charter is essentially showing that Canada is a corporation. That's essentially what happened. And then this whole lie has been perpetuated because of, just in my opinion, just self-interest. And it was in when was the first Quebec separation? When René Lévesque was, leading the Separatist Party, there was a guy named Walter Kuhl, Kuhl. You can search him. He wrote a book. And if you go to the mythiscanada.com, Doug Force has a copy of it there. It's a really short read and it's great. But he wrote a letter before the separatist movement really took off, and he wrote to René Lévesque and said, hey, basically congratulations on your movement, but just to let you know, you can't have a divorce if you never had a marriage. Quebec is already sovereign. You guys can just write a constitution now and that's it. You're done. You don't have to do this dog and pony show, separatist movement and all that. And so René Lévesque took this letter to Pierre Elliott Trudeau at the time, and that was, I think there was probably some handshakes and some money traded. I'm guessing, I don't know, and that was it. And it never came back. But even if you go back and listen to some of the old Pierre Elliott Trudeau recordings, I mean, he knew what was going on. He knew this whole thing. And that's where we are today. We have this de facto state, which is full of holes. And it's not only just that it isn't legitimate like the U.S. Constitution is. And I'm with you that, like, we could debate what is legitimate. But the way I see it is it's an opportunity, because this beast, this behemoth of the state that we live in, is just an amorphous amoeba that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it seems to be never ending. Maybe there's remedy. Maybe there's a solution in saying, well, you guys don't have any authority anyways, so go F yourselves,
Yeah, I definitely think, one thing I'll say for sure is it's good to know your enemy's playbook, right? And they lay it out for you and know their rules. And, by the way, this goes for every organization or corporation as well. I've been in trouble at work before because my mouth gets me in trouble sometimes. And, what I've learned is that there's HR policies and corporate policies that you can always use to turn an advantage, so to speak. And I think the Corporation of Canada, it's probably no different. An understanding of the rules that they're trying to govern you by, you can usually find something that you can play to your advantage. So I think that's great. I think that, from a libertarian perspective, it can't be any other way than there being contradictory things in there, right? Like they try to make a claim that they're protecting your individual rights, but then almost everything they do after that is violating your individual rights under the guise of some kind of sophisticated language and sophistry that is designed to confuse you and give you the illusion that you are free, when really you're just tax livestock living on a plantation.
That's literally
by a corporation called Canada or something.
Yeah, we're 100% in alignment.
And as a Rothbardian, I would say that pretty much every government in the world is that as well. Like I can't think of a way that you could bring a government into existence without violating individual liberty. It almost does it by necessity. Now, that being said, there you could imagine some scenarios where you could have an organization that might act as a government, that you contract with, that you could call a government, I guess. For example, seasteading.
Yeah, right. The Peter Thiel movement.
Yeah, Peter Thiel.
Very familiar.
Actually, and Patrick Friedman, Milton Friedman's grandson, have started this movement. They're going to build platforms out at sea, and then the idea is if you have your own platform, you can dock next to that platform. The original platform kind of sets the rules of governance for that colony or whatever, and at a certain point, if you don't like it, you can just take your property, your platform, and move it to another seastead where the rules might be more favorable to you or the conditions might be more favorable. So that is kind of an example. And, look, a private city or would have like where there's a private owner of the commons, whether it's the roads and parks and the infrastructure that holds the city together. You'd probably pay an annual fee for maintenance and for rule enforcement, and they would have a set of rules that you would want. A road owner would have a set of rules that you would have to follow. They would essentially be kind of like a de jure government in that they are enforcing rules, and they might have to use force to enforce those rules on their property, which is you've agreed to use by paying them a fee, by going on the road, by maybe having an agreement when you buy the pass card to get onto the freeway or whatever. You're implicitly or you're explicitly agreeing to a set of rules that you're now agreeing to adhere to, and they can enforce those rules. So that to me would be something that operates how government should operate. But this idea that we can stake a flag and say this land, as far as we can see, is we set the rules for all this territory, and anyone who moves here or is born here is tacitly or implicitly agreeing to abide by our rules by virtue of being here. No, there's no philosophical legitimacy there.
No,
so.
I agree. And this is where, I mean, you can go back in history, man, and it is a rabbit hole. Like, they did that. Literally what you just did is everything that we can see. The Pope Boniface did this a long time ago. I believe it was 1440 something. I have it in some of my notes here. It was called the Unum Sanctum, the papal bull of Unum Sanctum, and it's basically, I declare the world to be mine. It's insanity. But
even the idea of crown land, right? So how is it that the crown came to own this land? Like, what did they do?
Exactly.
From a libertarian perspective, you have to basically mix your labor with an unowned resource to call it your property, right? So that's easy to do with the farm. You plow a field, you clear some trees, you've mixed your labor with this property, you've made it productive. That's clearly your property. You build a road, that's clearly your property.
You add
but
stuff.
We have vast tracts of wilderness where the crown just says ours. You can't own property. Like, we own all this. Well, how did you come to own it? You're just saying you own it. You're not. It's like this guy. I watched this documentary called Lunocracy about these guys that are trying to find private ways of getting to the moon, and there was one guy in there that made a claim with the UN that of land ownership, of that he owns the moon, and he's saying that the way you register a nation or land or whatever is by going to the UN and fulfilling these documents. No one else has made a claim, so he figures he owns the moon. Well, no, you can't just file some paperwork, write some magic scribbles down, and make a proclamation. But that's exactly what every single government on earth has done.
That's what they do. And getting into that UN stuff, it's for your listeners, if they kind of want to chase the rabbit trail a little bit, is start at the international covenants, because the international treaties are very interesting things to read. And you will notice in them, particularly the International Covenant of human rights, it refers to man and woman. It doesn't refer to person or resident. It refers to man and woman, saying that you can't have bondage. And it's really interesting because all the countries of the world have signed on to these covenants, yet they do all these other laws. And how do they that basically subjugate people? And how do they do that? Well, they do it through the creation of a person. And like, I think it's important to look at this stuff, but I agree with everything you're saying philosophically, but it's important to see this stuff, as you said, to understand your enemy. And what they've done is they've created this person. So when you were born, your mother and father filled out what was called a statement of live birth, which is a document that you handwrite, you fill out, you send it to the Vital Statistics Agency or whoever it is in your province, and then they send you back a birth certificate that now has your names in all capital letters. It has first, middle, comma, last, all caps. So what they've done is they've capitalized you. And so they've turned you into an insurance surety, and
Sure.
you're a bond. And so now that's a person. And so look in your legal dictionaries, that's the person. That's not you. And so they trick you this way. And this is, and this is how guys like your buddy doing the CRA, he might be using that angle. I was in a court case a week ago, and I listened to a guy doing a similar thing on the CRA, and the judge could not get him in jurisdiction because the way the courts do it, I mean, is they kind of try to start you in the middle. They just want to assume that you're the person, and you've got jurisdiction. Okay, let's just move along, right? They get you, but if they can't get you, and you got to make them backpedal, they have to.
Right.
And I watched this go down in 3 sessions. The first judge said, "No, I can't talk to you. I'm a justice of the peace. I can't hear this man stuff because he's coming in. I'm there's no person here. I'm a man." And then a judge who came in, who was a bit more knowledgeable and understands common law, came in, and they went at it for like 4 hours on 2 different sessions after that, and he could not get him. Like, and he didn't even get into trust laws and equity and anything like that. He was just going in on the man, and it's amazing what can be done with that. And again, I'm not here telling your audience to go do this, that, and the other. It's just, it is incredible. This thing, like this person.
Well, and my buddy's been in on the court, and he's had success with this strategy as well, right? And you know, it seems to me the success is that the court is relying on getting the assumption that they have legitimate jurisdiction there. And if you can point your own rules and say, show how they're violating the contrary, and can't put you down, then that it's bad. And my position is that almost nobody understands it except people like me who have studied this, and that gives you a tactical advantage because it's your thing.
Your audio is it's epically I'm hearing like big time echo. I couldn't even hear the last 30 seconds of you.
How am I doing now?
It's brutal. I don't know what the Zoom. We might have to. Do you want to just like you're recording it? We'll have to.
Yeah. How
about you stop?
I'm just going to pause recording and you pop on. All right, so we got a Zoom issue sorted out. Now, before we got interrupted, I was saying that the tactical advantage guys like you have is that you understand these rules and these contradictions better than any bureaucrat. Like I suspect this bureaucrat that came out to you, the deputy, his deputy, even a lot of the judges don't understand what you're doing and how you're operating, and challenging the very assumptions that they're making and bringing it back to, it's like you said, it's a rabbit hole. It's like, okay, this act that you're referring to wasn't even decreed into royal assent, so how can it be even a law? So then the judge is left there scratching his head going, kid's kind of got a point. How do I even do this? So I need to refer to a judge that has more expertise in these matters, because I have no expertise here in exactly this argument that he's making. I can't, so I think this is how, you're able to get some of this freedom, let's call it, is just that, they're trying to maintain this, I guess, illusion that they have some moral legitimacy, or that there's some ethics and some backbone to what they're enforcing. And when you point out that based on their own rules, it's not even consistent with their own rules, then they have to go back to the drawing board and scratch their head, because most people just go along with it. I mean, we just look at, this COVID-19 scare, and we see all the rules and essentially martial law that's being imposed on people, and people are just like, oh yeah, I guess, that's legitimate. The government's got to do something. They don't even question it, right?
No.
And so most people don't even question this. It's like, oh, you got a cart date, you got to fight a ticket, or someone tells you. No one ever challenges it.
No.
And if they do challenge it, it's because they think they can't prove their case or something like that. It's not they're not making legal arguments like you are, for example. So I think there's there's something beautiful, I think, about what you're doing, about what my buddy is doing with the tax code, and what other people are doing, where they're using their own laws and their own rules essentially against them. And
Yeah.
I'd like to applaud you for that.
Well, thanks. I mean, I'm not. I haven't gone the tax road myself yet. It's risky. I've got a family and stuff, and at the end of
Yeah.
the day, in my opinion, these guys are just a cartel. Like
Yeah.
they're just gangsters. And
Yeah.
because to me, like when I really saw the de facto thing for what it was, the thing that's interesting to me is, you're a libertarian. You've probably been in these arguments with people, and you might propose ideas like a stateless society or something like that. You start talking about stuff like that, and then people go, well, what would you want to be like? What's that one in Africa that they always
Somalia?
say? Somalia, anarchy and Somalia, where it's a bunch of gangs. And I'm like, actually, that's what it is. It
That's
is a
what we're
bunch
at
of
now.
gangs.
Yeah,
The way I see Canada is we are in a corporate military dictatorship. That's literally what it
right.
is. Because the prime minister, even when you look at how the whole thing in Canada works, the prime minister, they go and do a vote. And then they go back to the governor general and ask to form a government. That's how it works. In the UK, they do it the same way. They do the election, and then they go to the Queen, and then the Queen decides yes or no. The Queen can say yes or can say no.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if there's a lot of cases where that happened, but that's what happens. Like that's how it goes.
Right.
So,
and the Queen chooses our prime minister too, by the way, right? I mean,
yeah, it's a complete racket. The whole thing is just it's just a bunch of criminals that have been doing it for a long time, and it's really neat once I find this stuff fascinating, and I've been so deep into it for so long that I'm beyond the point of getting angry about it anymore. Like I'm way past the anger. I'm 40. Like I got kids. I don't have time to sit and get pissed off all day. It doesn't help my lifestyle. But I find it interesting, and it's really neat. Like I really started getting into in the last month, getting into the Roman Catholic stuff, the church, because that's really where it all began. That's where this whole maritime law thing came from, was the Holy See. The Holy See, which is the corporation that is the Vatican. They were the first corporation, and they created the corporation's soul to pass on the wealth from one pope to the next. And then the Queen did the same thing. The Queen's a corporation soul. And it's interesting actually too, when you go back, like for me, the whole thing of Canada being a corporation, I don't really think it's that controversial, really. Like I don't think it's
all governments are essentially corporations, right?
They are. It's not like it's a silver bullet or anything, because if you look back at old signs, if you go and look at historical stuff where you see signs for cities and provinces, it'll say the Corporation of British Columbia, the Corporation of the City of Kelowna. Like it was all way out there way back then, but I don't it's interesting. Why have they changed that? I don't know. But we think that this thing owns us, but it doesn't. It's just we let it own you. And part of me, I gotta say, the more I've learned about this, and the more I've seen with my own eyes stuff working, and I've gone to court cases and I've seen incredible things go down before my eyes, I'm starting to think that maybe it's not all bad, and maybe the slaves should be slaves until they're ready to not be slaves.
Right.
And then they come, and in the sovereign movement, there's this whole thing that's referred to the age of majority, which is that's a legal term too, right? Like when you're 18, you're the age of majority. Well, in the whole sovereign movement, the age of majority is you figuring out who and what you actually are and where you stand, and then you coming to the plate and saying, thank you, state. I no longer need you to own my ass. I can now be a man and take care of my own business. And there's lots of people that have done that. That's not how it goes down, but metaphorically, that's in a real nutshell. That's what happens.
Right. It's kind of like how we emancipate ourselves from our parents at a certain point. It's like, okay, I think I can make it on my own. Your services will no longer be needed, kind of thing. Right.
Yep.
And I share some of your, quite often I look around at Canadians and think, you know what, maybe you kind of deserve to be jackbooted because
Yeah.
you're begging for it. You're just begging
Yeah.
for it. And like,
Yeah.
I there's only so much noise I can make before and so much pushback I can get when it's like we just want to be enslaved. I mean, that's all I hear all the time. We just want to
Dude,
be enslaved.
I
We
know.
love it. We love the jackboots. We love the crack of the whip. We love being yoked
Yep.
down. We love
Isn't it
being milked
amazing
for.
with this
Yeah,
whole COVID-19 thing too right
sure.
now?
Oh
Just
yeah,
the absolute, just how complicit or how complacent everybody is with just, oh, what's the government gonna do now?
right.
It's so funny. I see people's feeds and they're like, has our mayor made a statement about COVID-19 yet? Like that's gonna do anything
Right,
for
right.
you? It's amazing how and yeah, like I said, maybe it's not all bad. Maybe it's not so bad that people who have been slaves their whole lives and are happy being slaves and paying, 80% of everything they make in their entire life to this corporation. If they're happy with that, fine.
Yeah,
Like you should have the right to be a slave, but you should also have the right to be free. And you do. It's just nobody knows how to do it, or very
right,
few
right.
people know how to do it.
Well, and the plus side of it too is that those of us who can see the system for what it is and can see, like, even in my organization, right, and where I work, just a lot of guys are just they feel entitled. They're always complaining about management. They're always whining about this and that and how hard done by they are, and I'm not going to do more. They have to look after us. It's management's fault and yada yada. It's very easy to get promoted in that organization by just being a bit of a go-getter and having a good attitude about things, and like figuring out the lay of the land and say, okay, well, how can I provide value? What can I do to survive? How can I thrive in this environment? And just doing the things you need to do to thrive, rather than hunker down and complain about things all the time and just kind of be led around and let them control your destiny. You can
Yeah,
take control of your destiny, and it's easier to set yourself apart when everyone else is operating at such a low frequency
I
that
know. I
they
know.
just they need someone literally providing ass wipe for them, or they wouldn't be able
Exactly.
to wipe
I
their
know.
ass after,
Well, I
right?
think that it's easy for guys like us because that's just how we think. But everybody else, I'm not so sure. I think it's
Right.
kind of, I think the situation we're in, because I'm a farmer, and so I like to think about things in terms of metaphors to agriculture.
By
And
the way,
I
you're a good
think,
friend to have right now. So
yeah,
I just
totally,
want to put that out there on the table.
yeah. I think what's happened is that we have been like cows in a livestock farm for so long, like our mother was, our grandparents were, so on and so forth, that the idea of freedom doesn't even cross most people's minds. It's like how, you ever been to a ranch and they'll open the gate up and they won't even go through it, like, or they'll have I've seen this before with sheep, where I've got a buddy in New Zealand as a sheep farmer, and the animals are only used to going through the gate, which is like in a metaphor is the sort of, we're the gatekeepers. You go through this by signing this paperwork. The sheep, they'll do this thing where they move all the fencing around the sheep, and then the gate's there, and then they'll all just go through
Right.
the gate. But they could all go around, but
Sure.
they go through the gate because
Yeah.
that's the course of action that they've always known. And so everybody's been a farmed animal, a domesticated animal for so long
Yeah.
that they can't even comprehend what freedom actually
Yeah.
looks like because they've never really tasted it.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair, I think. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. All right, so uh, Curtis, I've taken up over an hour of your time here. I appreciate it. Um, I'm I'm going to get some of your links and post them in below the video here.
Yes.
What are your last words? How can people follow you? What's your final message?
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Tim. This is a great conversation. I'd love to do it again sometime. I'm going to have you on my
Definitely.
show. So I do a podcast. I mean, I do a lot of things. People know me as the Urban Farmer. They can find me on YouTube. There, I run a membership site that is an in-depth site where I profile different types of regenerative and sustainable organic farms each
Mm,
week, and they're all like sort of mini documentaries. That's called
nice.
FromTheField.farm, soon to be
And did I
FromTheField.tv.
see you're planning a trip across Canada and the States or
Yeah,
something in the
yeah,
near
that's
future?
right. Yeah, so that's me. I go and create content for that site.
Okay.
That's mostly what I do. But my passion project is this liberty stuff, to be honest. Like I love
Right.
farming, and it is my life. But I mean, this is what I'm really into. And so I started a podcast called Liberty on the Land, and they can go libertyontheland.com. I've had our mutual friend Dakota Cohen. He was actually episode
Right.
1 on there, so people can go check that out. And I will, right when we finish here, I will send you the links to those podcasts I referenced, because I would really recommend, if people want to understand how this thing happened historically in Canada, listen to my Doug Force interview. I've listened to a lot of other Doug Force interviews too, and I have to say, not being biased, that the one I did with him gets to the punch,
The best.
gets to the point real quick, because
Yeah.
I had the backstory and we didn't have to dawdle on it too much, but he lays it out, and you can reference everything he said. Like when I talked about it, I'm kind of just trying to get to the point real quick, but listen to Doug and you can reference every single thing he says. Go right on the Government of Canada websites and dig up the acts, and it's all there. It's all hidden in plain sight.
Oh, well, you send
So,
me
yeah.
the link and I'll post it below. So thank you for coming on, Curtis. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Absolutely, Tim.
Awesome.